This is business news coming to you live from our Rayfield studio. My name is Kermun Gukas. On the news this morning, the Naira opened trading on Tuesday, July 28, 2026, with a relatively narrow gap between the official Nigerian foreign exchange market, NFM, and the parallel market, as traders continued to monitor dollar liquidity and demand across the banking and bureau de change segments. At the official market, the Central Bank of Nigeria's NFM data showed the Naira trading around 1,362.09 Naira per US dollar, with the day's transactions ranging between 1,359 Naira and 1,365 Naira. The closing gap from the most recent available NFM session was approximately 1,361 Naira per dollar. Live interbank pricing also indicated the dollar was quoted at about 1,366.84 Naira per dollar in early Tuesday trading. This reflects ongoing activity within the official foreign exchange window. In the parallel market, commonly referred to as the black market, the dollar was brought at about 1,402 to 1,405 Naira and sold between 1,410 Naira and 1,412 Naira in Lagos. Dealers reported slight variations across locations and transaction sizes. The difference between the official NFM rate and the parallel market selling rate remained around 48 to 50 Naira per dollar, suggesting a much narrower premium than levels seen during periods of severe foreign exchange pressure. Currency traders said demand from importers, manufacturers, and individuals seeking invisible transactions continued to support the black market rate, while improved liquidity in the official window helped keep the Naira relatively stable. The Central Bank of Nigeria does not recognize the parallel market and advises individuals and businesses to obtain foreign exchange through authorized banks and licensed financial institutions. Now, the Nigerian equities market commenced the new trading week on a subdued note as investors lost 77 billion naira. The Ali index lost 118.66 points, representing a decline of 0.05%. Also, market capitalization shed 77 billion naira to close at 159.511 trillion naira. The downturn was driven by price depreciation in large and medium stocks, including Transcorp Power, Fitson Healthcare, Boa Cement, Nigeria Aviation Handling Company, and NEM Insurance. Investor sentiment was negative as 32 decliners outpaced 27 advances. Thomas White Nigeria emerged as the highest price gainer with a 9.92% increase to close at 3.99 Naira per share. Lasaco Assurance followed with a gain of 9.89% to close at 2.00 Naira, while Critical Minerals Financing Corporation rose 9.18% to close at 3.45 Naira per share. Champs Holding Company increased 7.78% to close at 4.85 Naira, while Nigerian Exchange Group rose 6.96% to close at 158.30 Naira per share. On the flip side, Sunu Assurance and Transcorp Power led the losers' chart with a 10% drop, each to close at 3.24 Naira and 219.60 Naira respectively, while international breweries followed with a decline of 9.85% to close at 12.35 Naira per share. NIMET International Pharmaceuticals depreciated 9.78% to close at 8.30 Naira, while Austin Lass and Company fell 9.64% to close at 3.28 Naira per share. Meanwhile, the total volume of trades increased 3.81% to 637.961 million units, valued at 57.202 billion naira in 71,240 deals. Transactions in the shares of Access Holdings led the activity chart with 47.575 million shares, worth 1.369 billion naira. FCMB Group followed with 40.333 million shares, valued at 478.246 million naira, while First Holdco traded 34.197 million shares, valued at 4.248 billion naira. Champion Breweries traded 33.152 million shares, worth 372.208 million naira, while Zenith Bank traded 25.442 million shares, worth 3.228 billion naira. In another development, Governor Caleb Mutfwang says his administration is committed to expanding ICT access across Plateau State by partnering with organizations to promote e-governance, e-commerce, digital innovation, and technology-driven security solutions. The governor gave the assurance while receiving the national executive of the Nigeria Computer Society, led by its president, Professor Sirajo Aliyu, on a courtesy visit at the Government House, Jos. Government House correspondent files in the report.
The Nigerian Computer Society is an umbrella association for all information technology practitioners across the country. Governor Mutfwang acknowledged the low level of ICT penetration in the state, particularly in the education sector, but pledged sustained investment in digital infrastructure and youth capacity development to position Plateau for digital economy. Mutfwang appreciated the society for the confidence reposed on the state to host its international conference and not to succumb to negative narrative about the state.
I want to appreciate the developments in the ICT world, and we have tried to see how we can keep and leverage on developments in the ICT sector.
President of the Nigerian Computer Society, Professor Sirajo Aliyu, commended the Mutfwang administration's achievement in information technology and peace building, explaining that the society's decision to host its 2026 international conference in Plateau State was informed by growing confidence in the state's security architecture.
In Kano last year, we were a little bit skeptical of mentioning Plateau State, but we take that bold decision, sir, looking at the kind of achievement that you have made in Plateau State in terms of IT development.
Hosting the conference in Plateau State is an indication that investors' confidence on the state has returned. This is Timothy TM.
While His Excellency takes a brief.
Now, Nigeria risks conceding the African markets to other countries unless it urgently tackles high power, credit, and logistic costs, undermining the competitiveness of local manufacturers. Executive Secretary, National Sugar Development Council, NSDC, Kamar Bakrin, stated this at the technical session of the 17th National Council on Industry, Trade and Investment, NCITI, in Enugu. Warning about the competitive pressure from the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, Bakrin said either our goods are crossing borders going out or everyone else's goods are crossing ours coming in. Highlighting Nigeria's cost disadvantage, he said industrial electricity costs about 8 US cents per kilowatt hour in Vietnam, 10 cents in China, 15 cents from the grid in Nigeria, and about 30 cents when manufacturers depend on diesel generators. On the cost of finance, Bakring said working capital cost between 27 and 35% in Nigeria. In Vietnam, it is about 9%. In China, it is about 3%. He consequently proposed measures to reverse the trend, saying every state should designate at least one industrial cluster for dedicated power within 12 months. Citing the expansion of Nigeria's urea production capacity from 500,000 tons in 2005 to 6.5 million tons presently, he said when a country prices inputs as if it wants industry to live, the industry lives. Pension assets invested in the federal government of Nigeria. Debt securities rose 17.5% year-on-year to 17.479 trillion naira in May 2026 from 14.468 trillion naira in the corresponding period 2025, according to data from the National Pension Commission, PENCOM. Financial analysts said the development is driven by high interest environment in the financial market and sustained federal government borrowings. The total pension net asset value (NAV) increased by 27.1% year-on-year to 31.322 trillion naira in May 2026 from 24.654 trillion naira in the corresponding period 2025 on the back of rising yield on investments in FGN securities. The PENCOM data also reveals that FGN bonds accounted for 55.8% of total pension assets in May 2026. According to PENCOM, the considerable proportion of government securities in the overall assets under management AUM portfolio can primarily be attributed to PENCOM regulatory limits on investments. To further illustrate the renewed interest in government assets, pension investment in treasury bills increased by 86.9% year-on-year to 1.131 trillion naira from 604.587 billion naira in May 2025. However, the Sukuk bonds, which comprises hold till maturity and available for sale, declined marginally year-on-year to 92.589 billion naira from 94.894 billion naira in May 2025. Now, capital inflows from China into Nigeria fell by 40.9% in the first quarter of 2026, despite the federal government's announcement that it had secured over $20 billion in investment commitments from Chinese investors across manufacturing, energy, mining, agriculture, and other sectors. Analysis of the National Bureau of Statistics Capital Importation Report for the first quarter of 2026 showed that capital imported from China declined to $5.55 million during the review period from $9.39 million in the corresponding quarter of 2025, representing a year-on-year decrease of 40.89%. The latest figure also represented a 13.69% decline from the $6.43 million recorded in the fourth quarter of 2025, indicating that Chinese capital inflows weakened on both annual and quarterly basis, despite growing economic ties between the two countries. In a statement in July 2025, the current Minister of Power, who was then the Director General of the Nigeria-China Strategic Partnership, Joseph Tegbe, said the $20 billion commitment was secured through a series of engagements following the recent elevation of Nigeria-China relations to a comprehensive strategic partnership. However, the latest capital importation data suggests those commitments have yet to translate into stronger recorded foreign capital inflows from China. China's contribution to Nigeria's total capital importation also weakened during the quarter. The country's share dropped from 0.17% in the first quarter of 2025 to 0.05% in the first quarter of 2026. Compared with the preceding quarter, China's share also declined from 0.10% to 0.05%, even as Nigeria recorded a sharp increase in overall foreign capital inflows. An analysis of the 5-quarter trend showed that Chinese investments in Nigeria have remained volatile. Capital inflows fell from $9.39 million in the first quarter of 2025 to $2.69 million in the second quarter, before rebounding sharply to $20.15 million in the third quarter of 2025, the highest level during the period under review. They subsequently declined to $6.43 million in the fourth quarter of 2025, before falling further to $5.55 million in the first quarter of 2026. And that's a wrap on business news. Do remember to stay tuned for News Track at 2 p.m. Thanks for watching.
PRTVC.